Cowabunga, everybody. Welcome to my channel. I'm John. This is my first video, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Today, we are going to be talking about two of my favorite subjects, classic movies and comic books. Now, about a year ago, when James Gunn released his lineup for the new DCU, I thought to myself, just as I've thought to myself at every DC announcement over the past 20 so years, wouldn't it be great if they started with the Golden Age and worked their way up to my all-time favorite storyline, which is Crisis on Infinite Earths? Now, don't get me wrong, I did love the Arrowverse version, but I still want a more comic accurate version of that storyline in live action. So I thought to myself, hey, wouldn't it be great if they started in the Golden Age and worked their way forward? Now, I will be doing a companion video to kind of see what that would look like. But this video, I'm going to take that thought one step further. What if in 1935, when National Allied Periodicals published its first comic book, uh, they started making movies and television shows right away? So today we will be casting the characters from the very first two comic books um, in live action or cartoon using actors from 1935. Now, first, some ground rules. One, I am not going to be doing any IPs that were not owned by National Allied Periodicals. With the possible exception of one that I'm not sure about. So no Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, because let's face it, if he was in a talkie, he would be voiced by his creator Walt Disney anyway. No Tom Mix. Tom Mix was a movie cowboy that did close to 300 movies in his career, and most of his comic appearances were either comic versions of those movies that he had already made, or they were advertisements for his BB line. Um, so don't think there's any reason to recast that. Two, I am not going to be doing any features that only appeared once. Now, I will be doing ones that appeared only twice, but that's because I believe that uh, two one-page comic strips is enough to at least give us a seed of an idea for a full-length feature film. And we can build the characters based on the situations presented in those two issues. Number three, I am not going to be doing anything based on classic literature. So, because those movies have been done over and over and over again. So, no Ivanhoe, no Tale of Two Cities, no Treasure Island, and no Three Musketeers or anything tangentially related. So, no Henry Duval either. Now, I said I wouldn't do IPs that were not owned by National Allied Periodicals. There is one that I know was a syndicated strip, but I'm not sure if it became syndicated after it appeared in the comic books or at the same time, and that is Lil Linda. So to err on the side of safety, I'm going to go on and cast those as well because I actually enjoyed those strips. Now, in 1935, um, publishers would take weekly comic strips and Sunday comics and package them up into a magazine format. Now, the problem with this is that they had to pay licensing to use those comic strips. So, National Allied Periodicals in 1935, this is the company that would one day become DC, they decided, you know what? Let's publish our own brand new original material. And they did. And it became New Fun Comics number one. Um, And then a few months later, December of 1935 to be exact, they came out with a second title, just simply entitled New Comics. And it is the characters that appeared in 1935 in those two comics that we will be discussing today and fan casting from actors in 1935. I'm sorry, y'all. I just misspoke. In 1935, More Fun Comics actually had 6 issues. What I meant to say is I would be covering both titles and all the characters in those titles in 1935. I didn't mean to imply I'd only be doing issue 1 of both titles. All right, moving on. Uh, in 1935, and for many years thereafter, comic books were anthologies. So you're going to find some stories of cowboys, some of science fiction, some of spies, some of kids getting in trouble, some of just pure comedy, some high fantasy. A little bit of everything was in each issue. And each feature only got a third or up to a full page to entertain you in 1935. As features dropped off, uh, those pages expanded. I think the largest one our first character ever had was a 4-page story. Now, as Julie Andrews taught us in Sound of Music, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Jack Woods was on the cover of More Fun Comics #1, or New Fun Comics #1, excuse me. And therefore is DC's first protagonist. He is a cowboy, and throughout his complete run is mentioned a couple of times that he's a Texas Ranger. Although towards the end of the run, he does do some things that are questionable for a hero or a Texas Ranger. And to cast this, I am going to throw up pictures of the actual actors so you know who I'm talking about, as well as some AI generated art to kind of see what it would look like. So, as our star, Jack Woods, I have picked Richard Cromwell. Now, the picture I'm showing isn't from Lives of a Bengal Lancer. However, I took look at a photo of him in that movie and went, "Yep, he looks just like Jack Woods." So here we go. Now, in his first story arc, he is given a love interest by the name of Dolores Nogales. I have chosen Dolores Del Rio to play that role. And the thing about his supporting cast is as soon as the story changes, they all disappear and we get a new supporting cast. So, at least for the first story, Dolores is the love interest. We also have Dolores's father, uh, Miguel Nogales. For him, I have picked um, Cesar Romero. Now, Cesar Romero was very young in 1935. However, he did still have his trademark mustache, and with a little bit of silver color in the hair, he could pass for much older. Makeup techniques were still being developed, but they were to the point that they could age someone. Uh, as the mayor of the town, I have chosen John Carradine. He is one of the minor villains. Uh, and then as a couple, as the major villain throughout the series as a whole, the major villain was Pancho Villa. Now, Wallace Berry, pictured here, he played Pancho Villa in a comedy in the 1930s. I have cast him as the serious version of Pancho Villa to see what that would look like. Rounding out the cast, we have a couple of henchmen, Miguel and Ruales. I have chosen Gilbert Roland and Anthony Quinn to play those roles. Moving on, we have Sandra of the Secret Service. So when you open the front cover of New Fun Comics #1, there's a table of contents. You flip that page, and you have Sandra of the Secret Service. Sandra McLean is a spy with the U.S. Secret Service, and as such, she is DC's first heroine. Now, the story starts off, she's kidnapped by a foreign agent, let go. Then the same foreign agent shows up at her apartment later that night and explains that there is a conspiracy to assassinate his princess. And so she travels to Gavonia uh, because she is an exact match for the princess minus the hair color. She puts on a wig, pretends to be the princess, sniffs out the conspiracy and the assassins, and that's the end of the first adventure. Um, and then she goes on to have several more throughout the course of her run. To cast this role, I have chosen Joan Crawford. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of Joan Crawford, but she was considered to be the beauty of her day. And even though it's like 5 years early, the story in the comic has a very noir feel. And Crawford was very good at doing noir. I also think she would make a good spy. The only other characters introduced in 1935 are the foreign agent, which I have chosen noted character actor Akim Tamaroff, sorry, and Sandra's valet by the name of Reynolds, and for him I have chosen Edward Everett Horton. Now there is one more character that I have chosen to cast, and that is Chief Ames. He is the bureau chief to which Sandra answers, and he does not actually appear until her third adventure. But I figure in order to make sense, she would have to report to him that she is going to go to this foreign country and interfere with their politics. Now, it is noted that Gavonia is vital to the U.S. defense. Maybe there's a base there. I don't know. But she does go to help the princess. Now, immediately following Sandra is Barry O'Neill. Barry O'Neill is another spy type drama with very noir. And in this case, he is an American detective working with the French chief inspector uh, to capture Feng Gao. Feng Gao is a Chinese national who is a terrorist and absolutely hates all foreigners, especially the French. And so he is setting up a series of attacks in France. And he has this cohort with him named Ivan. Now, Barry O'Neill is actually, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, the longest running of any of these features. So this is a pretty big deal. As the lead role, I have cast Ronald Coleman. Yeah, Ronald Coleman. As Chief Inspector Legrand, I have Charles Lawton. But, and this is the one I'm excited about, for the role of Fang Gao, I have cast Key Luke. Now, if you don't know who Key Luke is, you know who Key Luke is. He was the old man in Gremlins that owned Gizmo before, allowing him to be gifted. And he then comes and gets Gizmo at the end. Now, in 1935, Keelook was actually in his early 20s. So it would be a very different dynamic. I know that he is a good actor, and I think he could carry that villain role really well. In the role of Ivan, I have Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre is fantastic at film noir. Um, and he is, just perfect as a creepy guy who is up to no good. And I'm all for it. I'm here for it. So I would definitely cast Peter Lorre as Ivan, who is Fangal's henchman. After Barry O'Neill, we get an educational comic. This is called The Magic Crystal of History. And I will tell you why I'm including it in a moment. So, the story behind this is there are these two little kids, Bobby and Binks, and they run into this abandoned shed to get out of the rain. And they find this glowing crystal ball. And when they touch it, they get transported back to ancient Egypt, where they learn all about Cheops. And then after a few issues, they go a little further into Egyptian history and meet Tutankhamun. And then from there, they go to, I believe, ancient Rome and then medieval Europe. And they just keep traveling forward in time, learning about history and things that happened in our collective past. Now, it is assumed that they are siblings. They're about the same age and they are little kids. Um, but the reason why I'm including this, because I know it sounds awfully boring, is because a few years down the line, the name Cheops gets retconned to Khufu. And Khufu is, of course, the original life of Carter Hall, aka Hawkman. And in the first story involving Cheops, we also see a high priest who kills him. And we, again, later on years down the line, that gets retconned, and we find out that high priest is, of course, Vandal Savage, enemy to both the Justice Society and the Justice League. So let's get down to castings. For the role of Bobby, I have chosen Scotty Beckett. Scotty Beckett is one of the R Gang kids that did a number of movies in the 1930s. Basically, it was about 10 or more child actors who had a gang. Um, and yeah, he was, I believe, the youngest of them. For Binks, the little girl, obviously I'm going to choose the most famous little girl of the time period, Shirley Temple. In the role of Khufu, I chose, I've always pictured Khufu as a boy, and it is mentioned many times at least in the comics of the 80s and 90s, that he was a boy king. um, or a boy prince when he died. So I have chosen Freddie Bartholomew. Now, Freddie Bartholomew, the first movie released in 1935 was David Copperfield, in which he starred. And I believe that also got several Oscar nominations. Uh, as the High Priest, whom we know as Vandal, I have cast George Saunders. Now, again, after Cheops, they go forward a little bit and they meet Tutankhamun. For Tutankhamun, there was really only one choice. His name's Raymond Navarro. And in that particular time period, despite the fact that he's actually Italian, he was the go-to for any nationality of darker skin as a lead. So he has played Native Americans, he has played Egyptians, he has played um, Latinos. He does those dark skin roles. And so he was really the only choice for Tutankhamun as an Egyptian. After that, we get the first of our comedy entries. This one is entitled Jigger and Ginger. Now, Jigger and Ginger was one of those that only appeared in 2 issues. Uh, but there's only 3 characters, Jigger, Ginger, and Kit. Jigger and Ginger are a couple, and both stories involve them making a date, and then Kip plays some sort of nasty prank on Jigger so that he can try and take Ginger out, and of course, Karma ends up biting him in the butt. Now, again, only 2 issues, but in those 2 issues of 1 page each, we do get an idea of who these kids are. And using various tropes of the teen romantic comedy genre, you can make a full length feature using those tropes and just include these 2 short stories as part of the narrative. Okay, as far as casting goes, for Jigger, I have Johnny Downs, and for Kip, I have Roger Stack. Now, Ginger is being played by up and coming young actress by the name of Van Sheridan, who will go on to have many, many roles in the future as a romantic lead and is just an amazing actress. So I think it would be really cool to see her in like a teen comedy when she's late teens, early 20s in 1935, somewhere around there. Next up on the list is Wing Brady. Wing Brady would actually be a war serial. Now, I think I've mentioned serials, but I haven't explained what they are. So, back in the 1930s, before television, because television wasn't commercially available till 1938, uh, they would make these really, really long movies and they would chop them up into episodes, and you would have to go every week to watch the next episode. Most of these uh, features would have to be serials, at least until 1938 when they could transfer over to television. So, as I was saying, Wing Brady would be a war serial. It takes place in a desert, which in the Middle East, and the main characters are members of the French Foreign Legion. Well, specifically, Wing Brady is an American who is either on loan to the French Foreign Legion or has actually signed up, and he's a pilot, hence the nickname Wings. Uh, for his role, I have cast Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Now, in 1935, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was just getting started, but he had already made a name for himself as an action hero, much like that of his father, Douglas Fairbanks Sr. For his best friend, I have cast Lou Ayres, and for their corporal, I have cast Charles Boyer. Now, I could be wrong because it's been years since I've actually read the stories, but I believe early on, Wing gets captured by a tribe of Bedouins. So I have cast their sheik with J. Carroll Nash. Now, Nash, like Raymond Navarro, was Caucasian, but he played other ethnicities very well. There just weren't any Middle Eastern actors in 1935. All right. After Wing Brady, we get a slapstick comedy. Now, this one's called Judge Perkins, and Judge Perkins actually had a long run, but the only recurring character was in the first, outside of the lead, was in the first two issues. Now, Judge Perkins is a very straight-laced, upright judge, right? And he's the town folk where he lives are crazy, like crazy. Um, and in the first two issues, we get introduced to one of them. His name is Jasper, and I believe Jasper ends up overturning the boat that the judge is on while the judge is fishing. Uh, you know, it's slapstick. We're talking pie in the face kind of stuff. For the judge, I have cast Walter Houston, who is very good at playing the straight-laced foil to a more comedic talent. And even though he's only in the first two issues, I think I would keep Jasper for the entire run of the movie or serial, or if it transitions into TV, whatever it be. And for that role, I've cast Jack Oakey, who is absolutely hilarious. He's usually the comic relief in westerns and dramas. He's the guy you throw in for the comedy. And I think, yeah, the two of them together would be mwah, comic gold. Up next is our first sci-fi epic. This is called Don Drake on the Planet Sorrow. And as the name implies, it takes place on another planet. Uh, Only two characters are introduced in 1935, and that is the hero, Don Drake, who I have cast as Johnny Weissmuller. If you don't know who Johnny Weissmuller is, he played Tarzan in all the 1930s and 40s Tarzan movies and nailed it. Okay. Now, I want to see taking him out of the jungle and into outer space. Maybe give him a little bit more range than Tarzan allowed. But yeah, he's got the look. He's a great leading man material, and I think he would nail it as a sci-fi epic. And I gotta tell you, I am here for it. Like, I really want to see that. Now, as his girlfriend Betty, I've cast Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow was a gorgeous blonde bombshell of the 30s and 40s, usually in romantic dramas, where she was mostly the other woman. So I would love to see her as the girlfriend, especially in, again, a retro futuristic, campy 1930s space epic. It would be epic. After Don Drake, we have Loco Luke, which is an old-fashioned type melodrama. The hero is a cowboy, always down on his luck. Nothing ever goes right, but he tries to be a hero. And then you've got like a mustache twirling villain, uh, you know, tie the heroine to the train tracks kind of guy. And in this case, we also have a medicine man, Native American, who just shakes his head at all the goings on between the hero and the villain. In this cast, I have Eddie Quillen as Loco Luke, the hero, shown here in Mutiny on the Bounty. I think he would be I think it would be a fun role for him. Uh, as our villain, I have Fred Snowflake Tones. He is best known for musical comedy, and I think as a comedic villain, he could be really good. And as our medicine man, we have Charlie Stevens as one of the few Native American actors from the 1930s. I wanted to cast him in a Native American role. We're going to follow that up with a teen comedy called Scrub Hardy. Uh, Scrub Hardy is a short guy in high school, and he gets picked on a lot. Uh, in this case, I have cast Mickey Rooney, who is short, and in 1935, he was only 14 years old, so perfect to play a high school student. Now, in the first issue, uh, Scrub has a girlfriend by the name of Cookie Bots. Now, she doesn't appear in any of the rest of the run, which is quite lengthy. And so, because Mickey Rooney, you get more comic genius out of him when there's a pretty girl involved. I'm going to keep her around, and I'm casting Virginia Gray as his girlfriend. We're going to go from teen comedy to teen mystery. This is a very Riverdale type story without the unaliving of people. However, the stakes are still very high. Now, funny thing is, Scrub Hardy also plays basketball, as does the main character of this show called Jack Andrews. And Jack Andrews, someone has been trying to rig games, and he's got a scholarship on the line, so he tries to figure out who it is. And there's other mysteries involved a little later on. And so, yeah, very Riverdale with high stakes, but not as high as unaliving. And I've cast Donald O'Connor in the role. And then as his best friend and confidant, we have Coach Muller, who is going to be played by Pat O'Brien. Now, we're going to go from teen dramas to an older actor in a drama. In this case, Captain Eric, which is going to be a thriller on the high seas. Uh, Captain Eric is a sea captain who is under a contract, and another ship captain is trying to steal that contract out from under him, and adventure ensues. For this role, I have chosen Lionel Barrymore. I can't really tell you why I chose Lionel Barrymore. I mean, I know he's an amazing actor, and I've loved his work, but other than the look, I mean, look at the AI picture of him on the pier in the fog in a peacoat. He looks the part. After Captain Eric, we have Buckskin Jim. Buckskin Jim is an adventure, takes place in the 18th century, and it follows a young boy by the name of Jim. He is an orphan living on his own in the forest, uh, making his living as a trapper. And he also has a older friend named Trapper Pete, who has taught him the ropes and checks on him occasionally to make sure he's okay. Uh, in the story, there is a wagon train, and it gets attacked by Native Americans, uh, and a little girl gets kidnapped, and Jim and Pete go out to rescue her and find her. For this cast, I have chosen Tommy Kelly as Buckskin Jim Kenyon, Gabby Hayes as Trapper Pete. He's a very well known character actor and perfect for the role. For our war chief, we have Victor Daniels, who is also known as Chief Thundercloud. He is an actual Native American tribal chief and actor, and he usually gets cast as a war chief of some kind. Um, as the father of the little girl, I have Ward Bond. And for the little girl, I have Virginia Wheeler. Now, I'm going to say something before we go any further. The AI program I was using is free and uh, cheap. Well, free is cheap, but it does not do children very well. So, a lot of the children you've already seen and will see for the rest of this video, they don't look the ages that they're supposed to be in real life. Uh, Now, the pictures I have taken from the internet of the actors, that is how they look in 1935, wherever possible. I think I cheat a year or two here and there. But again, the AIs are just to give us an idea of what it might look like. Moving on, we have After School, again, with the more child actors. After School follows Lefty Peters and his best friend Slimsy Simpkins as they get into trouble after school. Now, they are under the protection of Lefty's uncle. And there's this old man who just hates kids, and you see him yelling at them occasionally, and typically with good reason. And then there's a little girl named Gertie who kind of has a crush on Lefty and hangs around him. Think very much Dennis the Menace is the vibe I get when I read these particular strips. So as Lefty, I have Jackie Moran. Uh, as Slimsy Simpkins, I have Tommy Bond. For Uncle Wilbur, I have Guy Kibbe, who is another very well-known character actor, and a lot of fun. For Old Man Spinks, I have Charles Grapeman. And then for Gertie, I have Cora Sue Collins. And that is the cast of After School. Okay, next up, we have a sitcom that takes place in a prehistoric cave. Yes, it follows the adventures of a caveman family and is called Caveman Capers. Now, this is another one of those that only appeared two, maybe three issues before it was canceled. However, I think that's enough for of a seed for a feature film, or possibly to make a series out of. I see it more as a sitcom. Unfortunately, again, television didn't exist for another 3 years. Uh, as the two little boys, I have cast Billy Lee and Bob's Watson. As their mother, I have cast Una Merkel, whose work I'm not familiar with, but I'm told she is very funny. And as the father, I have cast Andy Devine. After that, we have a show called Bubby and Beeble. Now, again, another two-issue, maybe three-issue run. It was about, how do I put this? Okay, you know how sometimes you have a little good angel on your shoulder and a little red devil on the other shoulder? Well, imagine if they were garden gnomes. Yeah. And there's this little boy named Jackie, and Beeble, the evil red devil, is always trying to get him in trouble. And the good gnome Bubby is always trying to keep him out of trouble. And of course, there's his mom's around. For the cast, we have as Bubby Henry Travers. Y'all might know him as Clarence, the angel who gets his wings in It's a Wonderful Life. For Beeble, we've got Eugene Pellett. For Jackie, we have Sonny Buff. And for Jackie's mom, we have Anne Dvorak. Because you gotta have an adult figure in a children's show. And then we come to our first animated series. Um, Now, here's the thing. Let's see if I can fix this light. Sorry. No, ain't gonna fix. Okay, sorry about the lighting, guys. So, Pelion and Nasa is about a penguin and a bear, respectively. And their friend slash straight man to their comedy is Mr. Walrus. Now, I could not get AI to generate some good images here, so I'm just going to throw up the cast. As Pelion the Penguin, I have Eugene Pallette. As Asa the Bear, I decided to go with a gender swap and do Anime Wong. Um, the genders aren't specified in the books, but they are best friends and typically they act like boys. But I thought it would be really cool to have a female bear. And then Mr. Walrus is being voiced by Charles Lawton. Yeah, the way I see it, even though it's not going to be called that for decades to come, all the funny animals are should be cartoons and they should take place on Earthsea, even though we're not going to call that until like the 1980s. All right, moving on. Oh, excuse me. We have 2023 Super Police. Now, obviously, we're in 2024, soon to be 2025. This is a bit dated, but as a 1935 sci-fi epic about, police in space with cheesy futuristic costumes and uh, special effects, this would be awesome. Like I live for this. I love that classic cheesy stuff. In fact, I plan on doing a reaction video here very shortly to the second sequel to the Flash Gordon serial. All right. So, in this, we have obviously the hero who is, uh, the leader of the science police by the name of Rex Cosmos. Yes, Rex Cosmos. Um, for this role, I've chosen Cary Grant. Cary Grant is classic leading man material, not to mention the fact that he's done action, um, and he's really good at it. Uh, I have never seen him in a space epic, but I'm sure he can nail it too. Uh, then you have the chief science officer, whose name is Professor Shanley. For that role, I've chosen Frank Morgan. Uh, Not really much to say there. I'm not really familiar with his work, but he does look the part. And then, as Professor Shanley's daughter and the heroine and love interest to Rex Cosmos, as Joan Shanley, I have cast Carol Lombard. Carol Lombard is a fantastic leading lady who would totally click with Cary Grant, in my opinion. Um, and again, I would love to see her in a sci-fi space epic. As one of the other two officers, Brute von Henning, just the name itself evokes like a security officer. So I chose Mike Mazurski. I'm sorry, Mazurki, who, yeah, he is great at playing the tough guy, mostly in gangster films, but I can see him doing it in a sci-fi epic as well. And then the other police officer is named Axel Yoke, and I picture him as like the pilot for their spacecraft. And I have it, and I also picture him younger and in the AI, I gave him long hair. I like long hair. And I've got him being played by Frankie Darro. And of course, any good space epic needs a villain. In this case, it is Captain Kidlaw, who is an evil mad scientist, space captain, would-be dictator, conqueror of the universe. And for this role, I have chosen Victor McClellan. And then, all right, as I was going through the list of character names from 1935, I ran across this one, Renee Avalon. And I don't remember who this character is. So in my mind, she has now become a femme fatale double agent, um, kind of putting the moves on Rex, but working for Kid Law. And for that role, I have cast Claire Trevor. Okay. The next one is the next feature is Captain Spinnaker. I don't like Captain Spinnaker. It's supposed to be a comedy strip, but it makes no sense whatsoever. And the visuals are very simplistic, yet still seem to be out of a surrealist fever dream. It makes no sense whatsoever. So in my mind, and this is only one of a couple that I'm doing this with, I have changed it. And Captain George Spinnaker himself is a retired sea captain, and he lives in this boarding house with the other characters whose names uh, were on the list from 1935 characters. Um, and all the adventures that you see in the comic strip are tall tales that he is telling the others. Meanwhile, I picture it as some very dry, like British humor amongst the three residents of this boarding house and George's nephew, James. So, in those roles, as Captain Spinnaker himself, I have W.C. Fields. For comedy, whether it be wet or dry, you can't go wrong with W.C. Fields. He's hilarious. Um, for Mrs. Cluck, the owner of said boarding house, I have Helen Wesley, who was very good at playing the matronly role and can do comedy very well as well. Uh, for Captain Sternpipe, whom I'm imagining as another retired captain, but also a rival, I have Walter Brennan. And then as James Spinnaker, George Spinnaker's nephew, I have Douglas Montgomery. Uh, Very good leading man type who I don't think got as much recognition as he should have. Okay, y'all, we've now arrived at the feature that I was unsure of that I told you about at the beginning of the film. I know that Little Linda was syndicated at some point because I read her in Sunday Comics when I was a kid. I don't know if that was before More Fun Comic or New Fun Comics or during New Fun Comics or if became syndicated after her appearance in the comic books. Again, to err on the side of caution, I am going to go on and cast it because she's a great little character, and I don't think that a movie's been made about her yet. So, the story behind Little Linda is she's fairly wealthy, but all of her family members are trying to use her for her wealth. So, um, her uncle and cousin her uncle's son, uh, hatch this plan to have her kidnapped so that they can hold her for ransom and then collect the ransom money themselves. And then I she's also got a stepmother and a stepbrother, who I think are just as bad at the beginning, but then when she disappears, the stepmother actually does develop feelings for her. I can't remember how that works. I could be completely wrong. Please, if you know, let me know in the comments. Um, but she escapes the kidnappers and goes on the run. She meets this hobo who teaches her how to ride the rails, and adventures ensue from there. So, as Little Linda, I have Maria Mae Jones. Some of you might know her as Clara in the film Heidi with Shirley Temple. Her uncle, I have Lionel Atwill as Wilbur Stone, and as his son Buddy Stone, I have John Howard. As Hank the hobo, I have Barton McLean. And then her stepmother is being played by Gail Sondergaard, and her stepbrother by Billy Hallup. Following Little Linda, we have a pirate adventure called Jolly Roger. It is also known as Jack Dewey, which is the name of the lead character. The lead character is a young boy. They call him a midshipman, but he seems like really young. I think he's more like a cabin boy uh, on one of the British Navy or the Royal British Navy ships. And there's a Captain Smith, and the ship gets attacked by pirates. They get captured, and then they end up defeating the pirates later on. I believe that it only ran 3 issues. I could be wrong about that too. Again, it's been a long time since I read these stories. Um, but as Jack Dewey, I have Dickie Moore, who is a really young kid. And then as Captain Smith, I have Sir Lawrence Olivier. Um, can't get more, British and uh, leadership inspiring than that, right? Although I will admit that only 28 years old, Laurence Olivier probably wasn't Sir Lawrence just yet. I mean, let me show that picture one more time. Look how young he looks in 1935. But let's move on. Next up is a comedy adventure with children. So, Spike Spaulding, the lead character in this feature, is playing in the streets with his friend Pincus one day, and they get kidnapped and taken to this far off country called Petronia. Why? Because Spike is the spitting image of the prince. And the Count wants to take over the country by getting rid of the prince and his older sister, the princess, and placing Spike on the throne, uh, thinking he can control him. In the end, Pincus teams up with a sailor named Red, and they save the day. But after this strip goes on for a really long time, like a couple years, I think. So let's get down to casting, shall we? As Spike Spaulding and the Prince of Petronia, I have cast George Spanky McFarland of our gang fame. He's, if I recall what I saw of those movies when I was younger, he was the leader of the gang, and uh, very accomplished child actor for his young age. Um, for Pincus, I have cast another Argang child by the name of Matthew Stymie Beard. For Count Alex, okay, I want something menacing yet regal and could pass for Eastern European. So, yeah, Basil Rathbone, gotta do it. I mean, granted, he's still very young in 1935, but he's got his acting chops together. Love Basil Rathbone. Uh, now the Count has a henchman by the name of Nico Rupo, and again, Eastern European, very menacing character. So I picked Lon Chaney Jr. Granted, I've never heard Lon Chaney Jr. speak in anything other than a Brooklyn accent, uh, but he's he is a good actor, and he could definitely play the role of the heavy very well. As read, I have picked Joel McCree, very young actor in 1935, but definitely leading man potential. Again, he's one of those that I don't think that potential was ever fully realized, but he does have potential. And for the princess, Susan Bell, I have chosen Olivia de Havilland. How, take two. Olivia de Havilland, who was, I believe, 1819 in 1935. She was already making films and was considered a great beauty of the time. And then the royals have a servant with the unfortunate name of Sing Lo. Yeah. Uh, for that character, I have chosen Philip On again to try and get actual Asian Americans to play Asians, even in 1935 when that was not common. All right, after Spike Spalding, we have our one and only fantasy epic for 1935 anyway. It is called Brad Hardy. In it, Brad and his girlfriend, Lorraine Lewis, stumble across a cavern tunnel that leads into an entire underground world. Now, this is years, like by like 30, 40 years before Scartus. Um, but you can think of this as the Golden Age version of Scartus, if you want. One of the first people they encounter is Prince Cardos, and he's kind of dark. Uh, but they basically go from one kingdom to another in this underground world over the course of their adventures. After they leave Prince Cardos, they end up in the realm of the Snake Men, and their king is called King Naga. Now, I personally want a, an actual Naga, which is the head and upper torso of a man that blends into the lower legs of a giant snake, or the lower half of a giant snake. It doesn't have legs, it's got a tail. Um, and so, yeah, that's what I want to see. And then they go to the kingdom of the rat people, and they meet the king. Now, I got confused and had to double check my facts here. I thought the king's name was Dre. It turns out that Dre is the name of the people, and I couldn't find a name for the king, but we're going to call him Dre for casting purposes. And then they meet. And Dre has a henchman who is a black magician. Again, still a rat person, but a black magician. And then from that kingdom, they go to one where the people are very, very, very tiny. Uh, they look like pixies or sprites without wings. And they meet their queen, Zira, and a high priestess by the name of Zastia. All right, let's get down to castings, shall we? First up for Brad Hardy, leading man Tyrone Power. Uh, just he's the leading man. He's got what it takes. And for his girlfriend, though, Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn is very young in 1935. I believe she's in her early 20s, and already showing star quality power. And yeah, I think she would be great in a fantasy action adventure. I mean, did you see African Queen? Great film. Big on the action adventure. Not so much fantasy, but big on the action adventure. For Prince Cardos, I have chosen Paul Mooney. He can play those weird, kind of dark characters that, but also he can do the good guy. So yeah, um, definitely perfect for the Prince. Now, for our next three, I do not have AI pictures because the cheap AI I was using, also known as free, um, would not do hybrids. They would not do, it would not do human animal hybrids. I tried every which way I could think of, and it just would not do it. So I'm just gonna pop up the actors. As King Naga of the Snake People, I have chosen Boris Karloff. Uh, Very good at menacing. Uh, Used to having a lot of makeup on and being in the chair for hours on end, and a great character actor. Every one of his characters is different in subtle ways that he could bring a lot of gravitas to the King of the Snake People. For the King of the Rat People, I have chosen Sidney Greenstreet. Now, this is a bit of a cheat because Sidney Greenstreet did not actually have his first film credit until 1940. We're talking 5 years after our casting. However, he in 1935 he was making a name for himself on the Broadway stages as an actor, and so he was around. He just wasn't doing film. So we're gonna call this a cheat and say if I'm going back in time and I am casting this film, I'm convincing Sidney Greenstreet to leave Broadway for a month to film, and then he can go back. And then I can claim I discovered him. Yay. Uh, After Dre, we have the Black Magician. For that, I have chosen Conrad Veidt. Um, I can't remember the name of the movie he did, but he actually played a very dark, ominous stage magician. So let's do some practical makeup effects and have him as a Ratman Dark Wizard. That'd be awesome. Now, for Zira and Zastia, I have chosen two very young actresses from 1935 who are known for their beauty, and it was basically a toss-up which one was going to be queen and which one was going to be the priestess. In all honesty, the priestess is the meteor role, so I gave it to the one who I thought was the better actress, um, even though a lot of you might disagree and think she should be the queen. So for Queen Zira, I have Janet Gaynor, and for Zastia, I have Vivian Lee. Keep in mind, this is at least 3 years before Gone with the Wind. Yeah. So there you have my castings for our only fantasy epic. Up next, we're going to do another teen comedy. Okay, so Charlie Fish is a teen comedy about Charlie Fish. He's gets into trouble a lot, uh, and it's more of a slapstick teen comedy, as like the first issue. The story is actually it might be the second one. Um, his neighbor wants him to remove a tub from his house. So he thinks the easiest way to do that is to tie the tub to his car and pull it. Except he ties the wrong tub and ends up pulling out his neighbor who was taking a bath. That sort of thing. Uh, so, as Charlie, and uh, most of the characters are only seen, aside from Charlie, are only seen once. Um, but I think it ought to be an ongoing cast. So everyone who was mentioned in 1935, I'm considering to be a supporting character that, or at least a recurring character that would be seen more than once. So as Charlie Fish, we have Jackie Sorrell. Uh, he sometimes works as a freelance photographer for the paper. So as his boss at the paper, I have Charles Ruggles. Um, the local millionaire is played by Edward Kennedy. His next door neighbor is by Hugh Herbert. Um, another neighbor is played by Spring Byington. Her son is played by Benny Bartlett. That son's teacher is played by Beulah Bondi. Now, Beulah Bondi is a hilarious. Hiram Supp, who is the local millionaire I mentioned earlier, has a bodyguard who would be played by Nat Pendleton. All right, moving on to Ramblin' Jim. Ramblin' Jim is very much a R gang type comedy about boys who hang out in the streets after school or skip school entirely to go fishing. Um, in this case, the main character is Ramblin' Jim Hunter. And for Ramblin' Jim, I have cast a very, very, very young Roddy McDowall. Now, off the top of my head, my two favorite Roddy McDowall movies are, of course, the original version of Fright Night, where he played Peter Vincent, and he also played the butler in Overboard. And I just love both those movies. Um, as the best friend, I have cast Sherwood Bailey. Now, and then there is a sheriff slash truant officer played by Frank Craven. And once again, we have an old man who yells at the kids. In fact, they call him Old Scratch. Here played by Charles Colburn. Now, next project is called Slim Pickens. I'm not sure if Slim Pickens is the name of the uh, man that eventually became the Golden Age Wildcats sidekick, um, but I think it is, which is something that gets me excited about this particular one. Also, my chosen lead is Sterling Holloway. Now, y'all might know Sterling Holloway as the voice of Winnie the Pooh and many other Disney characters. Um, I enjoyed the old 1960s George Reeves Superman TV show, and Sterling Holloway would appear about once a season as this nervous, jittery scientist, and I absolutely adored him in this role. So Slim Pickens is a detective, and it's actually the kind of role that Don Knotts would have played. Afraid of his own shadow as he investigates a haunted house kind of thing. Um, Unfortunately, Don Knotts wasn't around in 1935, and I'm very happy with the choice of Sterling Holloway. All right, y'all. Next on the list is Bob Merritt. Now, if made today, Bob Merritt would be an action adventure blockbuster summer film, maybe even a series of them. Very Mission Impossible type style. Even back in 1935, it would have made a heck of a action adventure serial. Bob Merritt is a millionaire inventor, pilot. He's designed his own plane that looks like nothing ever else. Um, and at the start of um, the series, he has just invented a new rocket fuel. And the sample and plans of which get stolen by foreign agents, and it's up to him and his team to get back. Now, his team is made up of four other men, and with the exception of Danny, they don't really have much personality. So I've kind of tried to inject some into the AIs here, uh, making Buzz and Tex kind of like his bodyguards, and Shorty, their mechanic. And for his team, I have also cast four other leading men in their own right, so it would really be more of an ensemble cast. Also, in 1935 comics, you meet a financier for his products named Cyrus Campbell, who will also be cast. All right. Speaking of castings, let's get to it. For Bob Merritt, the lead character, I've cast Gary Cooper, leading man, action movies. Yeah, perfect. As Buzz, one of his bodyguards, I have cast John Payne. As Shorty, I have cast Alan Ladd. I'm very happy with that one. And as Danny, Robert Taylor, another very happy casting. Um, and then for Tex, I have Buck Jones, who known for cowboy films. He's Tex, and that would be the second bodyguard. And then for Cyrus Campbell, I have Adolphe Menchou. Not familiar with his work, but he kind of looks the part. Moving on, we have Along the Main Line. Along the Main Line is a. It starts off as a comedy. It gets a little more dramatic towards the end of the run. Um, about Ed and Jake. Ed is a railroad um, engineer. Uh, in this case, played by James Cagney, best known for his gangster films, but perfect for this role as well because a lot of what he brings to the gangster movies is found in this particular character. And Jake, who is a brakeman, and here I have cast it George Brent. All right, of all the features on this list, this is the one I'm most excited about because it is the only one to survive to the modern day, and that is Dr. Occult. All right, and he's one of my favorite characters. So, if you're not aware, Dr. Occult was the first person with powers in the DC universe. I know everyone thinks it's Superman. No, Dr. Occult came 3 years before that, and he was a homo magi, much like Constantine, only with a much better disposition. Uh, he and Rose Psychic, who would eventually grow to be his love interest, were kidnapped as infants raised by the Order of Seven to use their abilities. And when he left them, he became a psychic detective. Now, in the first adventure, he goes up against Bart Moore, aka the Vampire Master, uh, who I believe was actually a vampire, but he invented this ray that made men believe they were werewolves and then would control them. Uh, yeah. And Dr. Occult is hired by the wife of of Moore's first victim to solve this mystery. Uh, I see this as a very horror-based movie, serial show, whatever. Yeah. Um, Now, Dr. Occult was invented by Simon and Schuster, and their art style, those are the same people who invented Superman, and their art style was pretty basic. So Dr. Occult looks just like a hero that comes a year later named Slam Bradley, who looks just like Superman, who comes 3 years after Dr. Occult and 2 years after Slam Bradley. So in my mind, they should all. In fact, the cheeky writers at DC even commented on this 51 years later in All-Star Comics number 54. Uh, you can see the panel here where they have Superman talking about how familiar Dr. Occult looks. Um, but in my mind, the same actor should play all three roles, which means, yes, I have cast Paul Kelly as Dr. Occult, who is kind of skinny and, unassuming in 1935. But that gives him a year to bulk up to play Slam Bradley, and 2 years past that to bulk up even more for Superman. Playing Rose Psychic, I have Virginia Bruce. Uh, and then for the Vampire Master, I have Frederick March, another great character actor who would totally nail a villainous vampire. As his first victim, Sander Amster, I have George Zuko. Uh, uh, I think that's another really good choice for this particular role because he does have the range to play a man who thinks that he is cursed as a werewolf. Yeah. And as his wife, I have Alice Joyce. Following Dr. Occult, we've got Skipper Hicks. Now, the premise behind Hicks is there are these three retired sailors, and one of them has found a treasure map. So, along with that sailor's wife and daughter, and the other two, they go on a treasure hunt. The lead character is Skipper Hicks. I have cast Walter Connolly in the role, followed by Soup Ladle Jones. Yes, that is the name given to this character, Soup Ladle Jones, folks. Um, and he was the cook when they were sailing. Here, I have cast Warren Heimer, and then the guy that finds the treasure map is Sponge Nose Kelly. Yep, Sponge Nose Kelly, that's his name. Here I have cast Walter Catlett. As Kelly's wife, Minnie, I have Mary Boland, another great character actress who would nail whatever humor we could inject into the role. And as their daughter, we have Frances D. All right, y'all. Remember when we discussed Captain Spinnaker and I like completely changed it up? I'm going to do the same with the next two features. Here's why. All right. The first of these two is entitled Don Quixote, which is a spoof of the Spanish literary classic Don Quixote, which in itself is a spoof of medieval chivalry, uh, philosophy, and mores. Uh, and then his sidekick in Don Quixote is named Hamburger. About halfway through the run, they change names to Sirloin of Beef and Cowslip, respectively. And they're no longer working for Spain. Now they're knights in England. Anyways, um, yes, we could do it as a live action slapstick, which is how it's written. But in the 60s or 70s, there was actually a funny animals comic called also called Don Quixote and a television cartoon named Don Quixote, in both of which the lead character is an actual coyote. So I'm skipping all of the middle stuff because it's basically the same adventures anyway. And I'm going to say that this should be an animated Earthsea project, starring or being voiced by Douglas Fairbanks Sr. as Don Quixote and Chico Marx as Hamburger. I just think that would be fun and funny. And uh, again, since my free AI had trouble doing cartoon characters, there are your actors. All right. The second one is in a similar vein. It is entitled Billy the Kid. Now, in the 40s, I want to say 40s, there was a funny animal comic called Billy the Kid, who was a goat cowboy. Uh, but this particular comic was about a little child who gets in trouble a lot. Yeah, in my mind, I jumped to the funny animal version, and so I cast this as a cartoon. Uh, I think it still works because he could be a young goat who gets into trouble while playing as a cowboy. Um, Here are the voices. I've got Slim Somerville as Billy the Kid and Billy Bletcher as Pudge. And just the name Pudge evokes bulldog to me. So I would, animate this as a bulldog. And next up, we have Sagebrush and Cactus. Sagebrush and Cactus is yeah, I guess it would be a slapstick style comedy with some melodramatic elements, specifically the villain with the twirling mustache and all that. Sagebrush and Cactus are a couple of prospectors in 1935, so they're already a couple characters out of time. And the villain is named Knife Ambush. Yeah, that's the villain's name, Knife Ambush. Who has set his sights on a local town girl named Betty. As Cal Sagebrush, I have George Barbier. As Alec Cactus, I have George Winiger. As Knife Ambush, I have Noah Beery Sr., as opposed to Noah Beery Jr., who I previously cast as Pancho Villa in the Jack Woods strip. And as Betty, I have Joan Blondell. Now that of all four of these, Joan Blondell is the one I'm most happy about because a damsel in distress, but not really because she can hold her own. I think that would be funny. Now we come to a very intense drama that, if made today, would definitely get an R rating in film or a TVMA in television, mainly due to one violent act at the very beginning of the story. It's called Vikings, and it follows the character Lothar from birth until his rise to power. And Lothar, at the beginning, is um, in the one issue of Vikings in 1935. Uh, it starts just before his birth and ends like 2 days after. So he's not a big character yet. Unlike the Vikings TV series we got recently on History Channel, this is very fantastical in that the Norse gods take an active role in the events unfolding. So let's get down to casting, shall we? As Lothar's mother, Sigrid, I have Ingrid Bergman. In 1935, Ingrid Bergman's first film just came out. So she is very young at the time of this project. Next up, we have Cole the Wise, who is a hermit uh, living in the forest, played by Victor Jostrom. As Sigurd's father, Hagbard, I have cast Sigurd Wallen. As King Harold, who is Lothar's father, I have Stig Jarl. And then as Odin, King of the Gods, I have cast Emil Jennings. Now we're going to go from a very heavy drama into a very funny comedy. So Jay Worthington Blimp is the lead character, and he is very much like Wimpy and Popeye, overweight, lazy. However, he is very much a braggart, and his mouth gets him into trouble. And he places a bet that he can bicycle from the East Coast to the West Coast. About halfway there, he meets up with this guy named Jupiter Jones, and they end up robbing a stagecoach and then taking the stagecoach the rest of the way to California. Now, for this casting, as an overweight, lazy braggart, the first name that comes to mind is Oliver Hardy, one half of the comic duo Laurel and Hardy. So yeah, he just embodies the role perfectly. Also, we have Blimp's brother-in-law Willis, Stan Laurel. Stan Laurel, of course, being Oliver Hardy's partner in all of the um, Laurel and Hardy films. If you have not watched the Laurel and Hardy film, please do so. They are hilarious, even by today's standards. I mean, it is comic gold. Next up, we have as Blimp's sister, who is unnamed, we have Edna Mae Oliver. Blimp's nephew is being played by Bobby Jordan. And as Jupiter Jones, I have cast Roland Young. Following Jay Worthington Blimp, we have another comedy, this one called Needles. Needles is a funny little man who wants to be a great inventor. However, all of his inventions go awry and don't really work out. As I recall, he only appeared in 3 or 4 issues, but that is more than enough to make a feature movie. In this case, starring Edward Brophy. I think he would do really well in the part, and it would make a funny feature. 1720 in the Black is about Jim Gale. Jim is an unrepentant gambler who wins a string of pearls in a high stakes poker game. Turns out the pearls were stolen from a woman named Louise Vallon. He returns the pearls, and she rewards him with $1,000, provided he never gamble again because she's fallen in love and wants to change him. He, of course, goes straight back to the gambling hall and bets it all on one spin of the roulette wheel, and he bets 1720 in the black. 1720 because that is Louise's address, and black because that is the color she was wearing when they met. And he thinks that's going to be lucky for him. It's not. He loses everything. But later that night, the pearls are stolen again. Um, and it is up to Jim and Louisa's servant Kim to find out who took them and recover them for her. Now, this is a mystery, but you've also got the bad boy gambler struggling with his addiction, and the woman that wants to change him, which also gives you that high drama within the mystery of who took the pearls. Now, for said bad boy gambler, I have cast Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda is an amazing actor. And as a man struggling with gambling addiction while trying to solve a mystery, it's in his wheelhouse. The man is just amazing. Um, so, yeah. For Kim, I have cast another Asian American actor by the name of Victor Sin Young. Now, back in 1935, Victor was mainly window dressing, background character, that sort of thing. So let's give him something with a little more meat and have him help solve this mystery. And for Louise, I have chosen Miriam Hopkins. Now, if we were to read new comics from December of 1935, immediately following 1720 in the Black is a strip called Chico Chaco. I am not going to cast Chico Chaco in this video. I went back. I did actually do it, and I went back and forth about saying who I cast, but in the end, I had too many problems with it. It because it is a somewhat racist strip. It makes fun of Mexicans, and so I had some problems with that being the stepson of a Mexican, uh, and I just didn't care for it, at least not the way it was written and the way it turned out. So I'm not going to cast it in this video. However, in my companion video, which should be coming out in a few days, I'm also going to discuss all the different ways I would change the source material to make it more palatable to today's audiences. And in that, I will cast Chico Chaco, just not in this one. Moving on. Next, we have Freddie Bell. Freddie Bell, he means well. Now, y'all, I messed up. In the source material, Freddie Bell is a toddler in a sailor suit. I got confused. I thought I was casting another teenage comedy. So I cast Leon Janey in the role. Now, Freddie's age is not specified in the source material, and most of the situations that he gets himself in, with very few modifications, could fit a teenager as well. So I am going to go on and stick with Leon Janey as my Freddie Bell and make it a teen comedy instead of a younger family comedy. Wing Walker would be another one of those, summer blockbuster kind of things. As the name suggests, it's about a stunt pilot who walks on the wings of airplanes. Along the way, he also solves mysteries. Classic trope, right? Unusual occupation and a detective. But this is 1935 when these tropes were first being written. So, as Wing Walker, I have Franchot Tone, who was a noted leading man of the day, and also probably the cause or the initiating factor in the rivalry between Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. I didn't know that till recently. And then as his co-pilot Nipper, I have cast Billy Blue, who is a really funny comedian who would inject a lot of humor into the drama going on behind the action and the um, mystery solving. And then we have Jibby Jones. Jibby Jones is another one of those kid who constantly gets in trouble kind of strips. For this one, I have cast another our gang cast member, uh, Carl Alfalfa Schweitzer. Uh, oh, he's probably the one people most remember from our gang, if they've seen any of it, because of the little hair coming up out of the back of his head. But yes, he would be my choice for Jibby Jones. All right, up next is The Strange Adventures of Mr. Weed. This is a a time travel romantic comedy. There's these three men. Oliver Weed is an inventor. He has a lab assistant named Fritz and a financial backer named Uriah Moucher. Now, the three of them uh, end up building a time machine, and they go back in time from 1935, 100 years into the past, to 1835. And they end up staying there because they all meet women that they fall in love with. So, for this cast, I have actually cast two of my all-time favorite leading men in the same show. As Oliver Weed, I have cast Claude Rains, uh, most famously known for his work at Universal as the Invisible Man. He's good, yeah. As Fritz, his lab assistant, I have cast Roland, Robert Young. Robert Young is probably he's up there as far as my favorite leading men of the time. Um, he's handsome. He's quippy. He does a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor, and he's more known for romantic comedy than he is, romantic drama. And I'm here for it. He's a good-looking guy. And then, as Uriah Moucher, the financier, I have cast S.Z. Sackle. Now, I'm not familiar with his work. I have seen him in film before. I'm just not that familiar with him. However, from what I remember and what I see in the photos, he looks like a financier. All right, y'all, we're in the final stretch. Up next, we have Ray and Gale. Ray and Gale only appeared 3 issues, and it had the great germ of a seed of a plot in that it was setting itself up to be, a treasure hunt adventure strip. And then things went off the rails. So Ray and Gale are twins who have just become orphans, and their friend Willie invites them on board his family's yacht uh, to take their mind off things. And then Willie's mother, Millie, discovers a treasure map. and everyone on board the ship just goes crazy and starts fighting over this map. And Ray and Gail are just kind of standing back and watching it. Again, if they had followed through with the plot to become a treasure hunt, it would have been a great strip and a great series, but they didn't. Um, and these characters, because of that, are very two-dimensional. So that didn't give me a lot to work with as far as casting goes. So I'm just gonna breeze through these. As Ray, I've got Robert Cummings. Twin sister Gail, I have Frances Farmer. Uh, for their friend Willie, I have cast Alec Guinness. Now, Alec Guinness in 1935 would have been in his teens, and yeah, y'all know him as Obi-Wan Kenobi from the first Star Wars trilogy. And here he is as a very young man who was doing film at the time. As Ray and Gail's parents, whom I'm assuming we would see in flashback and how they died, we have Charles Bickford and Billy Burke. Uh, there is a man, no one knows how he got on. I, it's not explained how he got on the ship or what his relationship is to the other characters. At one point, he steals the map and then gets into a fight and goes overboard and is eaten by sharks. Uh, his name is Silas Slump, and I've cast Sidney Blackmer in that role. Um, Gout is the name of another character whom I believe is the first mate, uh, being played by, I've cast James Craig. Millie is as Willie's mother. Um, I have cast Lucille Watson. Now, Lucille Watson is another one of those great character actresses that could inject a whole lot of humor to some of the darker goings on in this treasure hunt. Um, I'm very happy with that particular casting choice in this strip. And then as the captain, I have Donald Crisp. From there, we move on into our last animated project. This one is called Dickie Duck. To understand Dickie Duck, think of Daffy Duck with a cigar and Elmer Fudd as a farmer instead of a hunter, yet still always trying to get rid of the duck. Um, Dickie himself is based on Groucho Marx, so I think it only fair that Groucho Marx be the one to voice him. And for Farmer Gray, I have Edward Arnold. And then we come to Peter and Holohan. Peter and Holohan was one of those educational strips, like Magic Crystal of History. Uh, this one's showing things like how to make lures, how to make rabbit traps, things like that. But in addition to the educational aspects, it's about the friendship between a young farm boy and a Native American boy. And they are teaching each other how they do things in their world. Um, I liken the friendship a lot to uh, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, only Huckleberry Finn is a Native American uh, living that um, traditional lifestyle. For Peter, I have cast Gene Reynolds. Now, for Holohan, I have actually cheated a little bit by 2 years. Again, Native American actors were usually backdrop in westerns that were uncredited. Uh, but I have found one that whose first official film credit is in 1937, which is 2 years before we're casting this, and that is Jay Silverheels. Now, y'all probably know Jay Silverheels as Tonto in the Lone Ranger TV show. Uh, I think it can be safely assumed that in 1935, again, 2 years before his first film credit, he actually was treading the boards trying to find acting work, and was probably one of those nameless, anonymous extras in the background of a Western or two. And for our final entry, back at the very beginning of comics and going all the way up into the 60s, actually, most books had a page, sometimes two or three, devoted to one panel gags. So think like strips of Family Circle or Far Side, where they have just one panel to tell a joke. Um, and almost all of these had like a different name every time it was drawn. So sometimes it's just for laughs, or laugh the day away, or simply gags. You know, and a little bit after 1935, I can't remember if it's Fawcett or Charlton, but one of them, it doesn't really matter because they were bought out by DC anyway, um, had a long running strip in the Golden Age called Rube Goldberg's Sideshow. And so for that, I am stealing that name for this imaginary uh, casting. And I see it as like a Saturday Night Live, Mad TV, big gay sketch show type variety show. Now, granted, it's 1935, TV hasn't come out yet. I would still do it as uh like intermission type features to run between movies. Um, for my 1935 casts, I have 13 comedians of the time period. I ran the numbers, and yeah, that was a pain. I ran the numbers and figured out that there were on average there are 13 cast members in Saturday Night Live, and they, by gender, they are seven male, six female. So that's why I've cast here. Right at the top, we have Rube Goldberg. I figured since the Sideshow comic strip is named after the writer slash comedian who wrote it, it should only be fair that it uh, he be in it. We also have Patsy Kelly, Joey Brown, Marion Davies, Ed Wynn, Lucille Ball, very young showgirl period of her life, Lucille Ball, Jimmy Durante, Selma Todd, Hugh Herbert, Marjorie Main, Billy Gilbert, Eve Arden, again, very, very young in 1935, but still funny. That woman's always been funny. And coming in at the end is Fuzzy Knight. Now, if y'all have stuck through me through this entire video, I thank you. It means so much to me. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Even if you didn't like it, could you please share it? And I'm sure you've got a nerdy friend in your life who enjoys this stuff as much as me. Sorry about that. Uh, yeah, so please like, subscribe, and definitely share with someone you think will enjoy it. Right now, the surf's up, and I gotta go. Cowabunga, everybody. See you later.